Hello everyone, welcome back to Trek a Day and another Trek Chat. Just a few things I wanted to talk about briefly in regards to some behind the scenes things happening with Paramount and Skydance. Something that surprised me with some interesting opinions and perspectives on a Strange New World episode, as well as continuing our rewatch discussion of Star Trek Next Generation. If this is the first time you're encountering one of these videos, I have been going through very slowly as I've been doing a rewatch of TNG with my wife, talking about a few episodes here and there within these types of videos. First, getting into the news coming from this new Paramount Skydance merger, which we discussed a bit before in the previous Trek Chat video. It seems more and more that David Ellison, who is now the CEO of this newly formed Paramount Skydance merge corporation, wants to and sees Star Trek as a priority IP, something they want to be one of the franchises at the forefront, and more that seems to be something that's going to come with a big shakeup behind the scenes, which happens in these situations. If you really do want to take something in a new direction, you have to bring in some new perspectives. And right now, it's looking like Chris Parnell, who is a former Sony TV as well as the Apple TV Plus executive, is expected to have a large role in this future of Star Trek. And there have, of course, been, since Discovery Season 1 first started airing, constant Alex Kurtzman's fired, he's gone, whatever, for years now. But I think that there's a very good chance that when his current 10 years contract ends at the end of 2026, that he will likely either be completely gone or have a very diminished role. I feel like that's going to be part of the big shakeup. I think that now it is actually reasonable to have that expectation that he would step down from his era of Star Trek that he's been helming, bring in a new era as they are navigating the wrap-up of the current shows and entering a new phase where they also want to merge the movie and Star Trek TV realms more so than they have been in a very long time. The movies have been seen as a very separate property from the television series, and they've said they want very strongly to be there be a more of a connection, kind of in the way Marvel does, where a lot of their streaming TV shows and movies are very connected, where to really understand what's happening in a movie, you maybe had to have seen a series, and we'll see how that plays out, because in some cases that's backfired for Marvel, but it depends on how they do it. If they use that as a tool to where a series ends and then kind of gets a big screen movie, or a big screen movie enters a series, maybe that's even how we will get something like Legacy. Obviously, that concept is something I want to see on the small screen with weekly adventures, but even if, say, that's not viable and instead we get a movie based on that idea and something else, I think that having those be priorities, having the movies and the TV shows kind of work in tandem, is something that could really be a strength depending on how well they plan things out beforehand. Don't throw in a Star Wars situation where they didn't plan out the trilogy, these latest movies before getting into it, and you have that disconnect. Then, just briefly talking about the next couple of episodes in the TNG rewatch, we have Hide and Q, episode 10 from Season 1. The return of Q to the Enterprise, this time focusing on Riker. I always found this one, while not particularly an overall very strong episode of Star Trek, to be fairly enjoyable and have some interesting ideas. I always kind of humorously chuckle and laugh and like all the elements of when they're put into the dangerous situation against the army of French pigmen. It's just very enjoyable in a very kind of like TOS fashion. There's something about it that always kind of tickled my funny bone. So that is an element of the episode that I know it doesn't work for some people, but I always enjoyed that. And I like the playfulness of Q in this episode. And at the same time, really getting more of an insight into who Q is. A little more of his personality forming in compared to Encounter at Farpoint, we're just first seeing him and we don't really know a lot about him or get a strong sense of his personality or goals really more so than just that he's an omniscient being and this test of humanity. Here we really start getting, for the first time, the inklings of the Q that we would know and love in all the further appearances of the character, as well as a look into the psyche of Riker and really getting a good discussion of the concept of absolute power corrupting absolutely. Somewhat of a Gary Mitchell situation where Riker is gifted with the powers of a Q. And the moment where all of the gifts that he tries to give bridge crew and Wesley in this, now looking back, hilarious interpretation of what he would look like as an adult, when those are all rejected and you really start to get a good sense of the perspective of the characters and why they would reject that type of power at this time, and how that plays very much into a lot of the reasoning behind things such as the Prime Directive. It really gets into the logic and mindset of the Federation rejecting those powers, partially because of the negative ramifications of that, the potential negative, in the same way that we would not give certain technologies to cultures at certain levels of development. It all kind of ties in fairly well. I feel like that element could have been written a little better. I think that sometimes some of the presentation of some of these ideas and the dialogue isn't exactly there. It's not quite up to that kind of 10 out of 10 level that sometimes Star Trek can achieve, but it does a fairly good job. So overall, it's a pretty good episode. It's never been one of my absolute favorites, but I think it's fairly solid. Next is one that is really just a personal taste thing. We have The Big Goodbye. My wife and I differ on our opinions regarding this episode. I love it. She's just not a fan of a lot of the Dixon Hill, a lot of the holodeck shenanigans type stuff. It's just not one of her favorites, and everyone has their favorite types of episodes. I always kind of like that type of episode. It's just fun, and seeing the enjoyment of the holodeck technology this early stage, and the characters really loving having this playfulness to the role playing, especially Picard and Data. The two of them are my favorites in this as they start getting into the roles. They just really, the almost giddiness that Picard has getting into this character, really kind of living out one of his favorite casual reading pastimes, and Data just going all in with the role. And of course, Dr. Crusher, it's wonderful having her there, and I love the little moments. I mean, she comes in looking unbelievably gorgeous, and those moments where she keeps wanting this to be just some time with her and Jean-Luc. They really, and all the moments when people invite themselves along, or it just keeps interrupting her idea of what she wanted this fun time to be, and I love it. And Gates McFadden does such a good job with conveying so much through like little looks in this episode. So I just think it's fun, and of course the holodeck malfunction and getting stuck in there, and it's something we would end up seeing a million times in the future. And when it's done well, though, I just find it to be very enjoyable, and this is one of those cases where I really love it. I love the whole Dixon Hill thing. I like that the malfunctioning holodeck and how it ties in to a difficult diplomatic situation, that they really need to get Picard out of there and onto the bridge. And it's just, for me, an overall fun episode. It's just one of those that I can put on in the rotation, and it's fun. It's not one of my the big top 100 for the franchise, but it's one that I've seen many times over the years, and I still find it to be enjoyable when I run across it. Now, just something that I found surprising as I came across some discussions of a Strange New Worlds episode, the episode A Space Adventure Hour, and I know I still have some Strange New Worlds discussions to get to, the Salat Who Ate Its Tail, and What is Starfleet, and then of course this week we have the one I've been really dreading, I hope it's good, the 4.5 Vulcans, the one we got that short little preview of with Patton Oswalt, and just, I don't know about this one, but hopefully it's not as bad as it looks. I have not watched those yet. I purposely wait to watch those until I know I have time to do what I do with those, where I watch it and then just immediately record a video, just get my initial reaction, like right off the bat, and just haven't really had time to set aside to where I can really do that. But I'll be doing those this week, and so I'll be all caught up. I'll give them each their own individual video still, and hopefully by the end of the weekend be caught up with this week's episode as well. So I've been purposely avoiding any kind of information about them, opinions, whatever. But I encounter just randomly, I occasionally try to watch some other Star Trek channels, especially I focus on, aside from the couple of the bigger podcast ones that I really like to watch, with a lot of the actors from Star Trek, I try to focus on really small channels, stuff like mine, things that people either kind of like me just started and are doing it for fun. People that's more just the love of Star Trek. I don't watch a lot of the bigger channels. And it's been interesting to see that the majority of them have ranged from very positive about this episode, A Space Adventure Hour, to kind of where I'm at, where somewhat middling, where I didn't think it was anything super spectacular, but I also didn't think it was downright terrible. It was just, it was fun for what it was, And that leads me to something that I will get its own video that I'll discuss about my overall experience and kind of frustration with Strange New Worlds, where I'm at with the enjoyment versus the things I don't like, balancing them out. But anyway, I did encounter just one or two and a few comments and things, people who absolutely hated the episode, which, okay, interesting. What did you hate? I could see why you would hate this episode. It's not going to be to everyone's taste. Again, like I said, that the holodeck malfunction episode, not everyone's going to like that. Not everyone's going to like the Klingon focus episodes. Not everyone's going to like everything dealing with the political and religious elements of Bajor. Everyone has their kind of favorite and least favorite types of Star Trek. So I could completely see why someone would just dislike this episode completely. But a lot of the real just abhorrence, like the people with real vitriol towards the episode, came from a perspective that never dawned on me, because I don't know how you're getting it, where the opening with the sort of parody show that they were using as the background for them being able to discuss, in a way, the influence of Star Trek, getting into Uhura's moment where she very much talks about how fiction can hold such incredible power over people that it's reflected in their own beliefs and in their own lives, and fiction can carry into reality. How they took that beginning thing as somehow being mocking of TOS in a derogatory and hateful way. And that's just bizarre to me, because that's very obviously not the intent at all. And it makes me wonder, when you watch Galaxy Quest, do you think it's mocking TOS? It's not what it's doing. When people do, Star Trek stand-up, or the parodies on like SNL shows like that, or when they did for the 30th anniversary, like the Frasier thing with Voyager, do you see that as mocking? Like that's not really what it is. I mean, the Star Trek, some of the most hardcore fans, you have to be like a real love of Star Trek to do like a Star Trek stand-up routine, kind of like the stuff you'd see at the end of Trekkies, that kind of thing. Conventions, I don't know how much you do it these days, but you used to get that a lot at some older conventions and things, and it was very just kind of loving parody. And that's one of the two levels that I feel like kind of why I liked that element of the episode more than the murder mystery thing, is because I felt like it really worked in two ways. One, it was that kind of just jovial, playful parody of something that we love, and at the same time also making fun of the preconceived notions that people have that have never seen TOS. It really, to me, reminded me of how people people don't watch sci-fi at all, who've never seen anything about Star Trek, and they just have these weird preconceived notions of what it actually is, a bunch of weirdos, and what they were showing was kind of how I view, if I talk about Star Trek, what they're seeing in their mind, what their preconceived notion is of Star Trek. And it's part of why I found it funny, because it kind of mocking that idea and then tying that into some of the themes within the murder mystery with those characters, playing those actors, and with Uhura's speech getting into the idea of how, oh, it's just a silly sci-fi. No, like how something like that can hold so much power for people that love it. And I think it was really surprised me to see, and I think there was even a comment on my video, someone saying, oh, that it was very, just making fun of TOS, looking down on TOS, and if that's what it was doing, I would absolutely hate it and would have turned off the episode. That would be infuriating. TOS is, to me, a nearly untouchable classic TV show that I hold very dearly. I don't think it was what it was doing at all. I think it was working on those two levels that I was talking about, making fun of the perception of Star Trek from the real outsider, as well as just lovingly poking fun in a parody way with that Shatner interpretation, like being purposely over the edge, really just going for it, hamming things up, and purposely being silly. So it's one of those where, yeah, I understand why people wouldn't like that episode. I 100% agree. It's far from perfect, even though I like some of it. But I don't know, I just feel like when I truly dislike something, I want to dislike it for what it is and what it's trying to be, not some interpretation that is not really reflected in the content. But that is the complexity of art, whether it is something very simple or something very complex. There is the intent of the creator, and then there is the perception of the audience, and sometimes those don't match, and a lot of times that is going to vary completely. You can get into like a high school English class. One of my jobs, I work in a high school, and a lot of English classes, and sometimes there is that argument of, what does that mean, the red apple, and thinking about the intent of the author, or is the interpretation from one perspective very different from that intent, if there even was an intent, or is the reader projecting something? Whenever you experience art, you are projecting a bit of yourself into it. And that's how many people can pull very, very, very different meanings from the same thing. So it's just something that I found very curious, because that idea would never have occurred to me that was what it was doing. So interesting. But so that's it for today's Trek Chat, and I'll be back with those Strange New Worlds episode discussions. I don't want to say looking forward to watching them, because just from the little bits that I've seen just as far as previews, again, I've been trying to say as little as possible. Like, I don't know, could go either way with some of these ideas, but hopefully, trying to keep, fingers crossed with every episode as it comes out, that it's going to be an experience that exceeds my expectations. So we'll see what happens, and I just am anxious for this year and to get into 2026 with Star Trek to really, I feel like it's going to take a little while, but within the next year, get a clearer picture of where the franchise is going from this point forward.